Please save us.
I'll do what I can.
The cottonwood trees along the Gila River stood ancient and unmoved by the violence that happened beneath their branches. On this particular afternoon in late August, they would witness something that would echo through the generations, an act of mercy that would change the course of 3 lives forever. Sarah Montoya had ridden with the Apache for 15 years, though she'd been born white in a mining settlement that no longer existed. Her mother had died when she was 5, her father shortly after, and the Apache had taken her in, raised her as their own. She spoke their language better than English now. She thought in Apache. Her loyalty was to the people who had saved her, not to the accident of her pale skin. Lucia was pure Apache, daughter of a war leader, niece of Geronimo himself, though she never spoke of it. She was fierce and beautiful in the way desert flowers are beautiful, delicate in appearance but rooted deep in stone. She and Sarah had been riding together for a decade, had fought together, survived together, and somewhere along the way had become something to each other that neither had the words to fully explain. It was more than friendship. It was less, perhaps, than what society called love. It was partnership at the deepest level. 2 souls who understood each other without words. They'd been captured during a raid that went wrong. The cavalry had set a trap, and though most of the band had escaped, Sarah and Lucia had been separated from them, cornered, and taken. They'd been held at Fort Hancock for 3 days, interrogated, threatened with hanging if they didn't reveal the location of the main camp. They'd said nothing, even when they were beaten, even when they were denied food and water. The locations of their people were sealed behind their lips. This morning, the commanding officer had made good on his threat. They stood on wooden boxes beneath the oldest cottonwood, thick ropes around their necks. A crowd had gathered. Soldiers, the wives of officers, people from a nearby town who'd come to watch what they'd been promised would be a hanging of Apache insurgents. The officer, a man named Crawford who'd made a reputation for himself through brutality, stood on a platform reading the charges. Conspiracy, aiding terrorists, refusing to provide military intelligence. Sarah and Lucia had exchanged a look across the distance, separating them. In that look was goodbye, was apology, was gratitude for the years they'd had, was hope that whatever came next, they would find each other. They had grown up believing in the Apache concept of balance, of the interconnectedness of all things. Death was not an ending, but a transformation. Perhaps they would meet again in another form. Crawford raised his hand to give the signal. That's when the man on the gray horse came. He appeared from the east, riding hard, kicking up dust that caught the afternoon light. His horse was fast and wild, and he rode it like it was an extension of himself. He wore a simple shirt, denim pants, and a wide hat that shadowed his face. For a moment, no one reacted. He was just another rider on the vast landscape. Then he fired a shot into the air. The crack of gunfire froze everyone. The officer's hand dropped. Soldiers shifted, uncertain. The man brought his horse to a skidding halt, positioning himself between the hanging platform and the crowd. "I can't let this happen," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered people. It was a Texas accent, slow and certain. "This is a military execution," Crawford said, his hand moving to his sidearm. "You need to ride on, or I'll have you arrested for interference." "No, sir, you won't," the man said. He drew his pistol in one fluid motion, and it was pointed directly at the officer. "Because if you so much as twitch toward your gun, I'm going to put a bullet in your chest. And then I'm going to cut these women down, and I'm going to disappear into that desert. And there's not one thing you can do to stop me." Crawford's face went red. "You can't be serious. These are Apache. They're enemies of the United States. They're human beings," the man said, "and I won't stand by and watch innocent people hang for the crime of being born into a people the United States decided to exterminate." For a long moment, no one moved. The tension was absolute, the kind that precedes violence, the kind that changes everything. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, an officer, older, clearly someone with rank, stepped forward. "Stand down, Captain Crawford," he said. His voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. "This execution was not properly authorized through departmental channels. We'll postpone until we have verification from higher command." Crawford's jaw clenched. but he obeyed. The officer turned to the man on the horse. "And you, sir, I strongly suggest you leave this territory immediately." The man nodded and approached the hanging platform. He cut Sarah down first, then Lucia, moving quickly but without panic, like someone accustomed to danger. As soon as the ropes fell away, he handed them each a rifle and a pack of supplies. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Better than you can," Lucia said in English, her accent thick. "Who are you?" "Name's Matthew Cordell. And right now, I'm someone who's very interested in not getting shot. Can we save the questions for later?" They rode hard toward the west, toward Apache territory, toward the borderlands where the military's authority began to dissolve into myth and rumor. Matthew rode behind them, watching for pursuit that never came. The older officer had apparently meant what he said. There would be no chase, at least not immediately. They rode through the night and well into the next day before stopping at a hidden canyon that Lucia knew, a place where water ran cold and deep, and the walls were high enough to hide them from the sky. They collapsed near the water, exhausted beyond speech. Matthew was the first to recover. He started a small fire, built from wood that wouldn't smoke, and heated water from the stream. He had food, dried beef, hard biscuits, coffee. It was the best meal Sarah and Lucia had eaten in weeks. "Why?" Sarah asked finally, speaking in English. It felt strange in her mouth after days of silence. "Why would you risk everything for people you don't know?" Matthew was quiet for a long time. "My sister married an Apache man. It was during a period of peace. There was talk of treaty, of coexistence. They had a daughter. Beautiful child, smart as a whip. The cavalry came through our town, and they killed all three of them. Said it was an accident. Said they couldn't tell who was Apache and who wasn't. Said they were sorry." He stared into the fire. "I've spent the last 5 years trying to balance that scale. I've helped people escape, provided information about cavalry movements, done everything I could to make sure what happened to my sister never happened to anyone else. It's not much, but it's something." Lucia and Sarah exchanged a glance. They understood the language of loss, the desperate need to make meaning out of meaningless tragedy. "You save our lives," Lucia said. "Our people will want to reward you. You could come with us. You could join our tribe." Matthew smiled sadly. "I'm grateful for the offer, but I'm not Apache. I can help from the outside, move between worlds in a way you can't. That's where I'm most useful." But he didn't leave immediately. He stayed with them for 3 days, helping them recover, teaching them about military movements and cavalry positions that would help them navigate safely back to their people. He treated their wounds with surprising gentleness, shared stories with them about the frontier, listened to their stories about life among the Apache. On the morning he left, there was a moment where something passed between him and Sarah, a recognition of kindred spirits, of people who'd been torn from their original worlds and had found home elsewhere. He kissed her forehead, the gesture of a brother rather than a lover. "Take care of each other," he said. "That's how you survive out here. You hold on to the people who matter." They returned to their people as heroes. The story of the cavalry execution and the cowboy who'd stopped it spread through the Apache camps like wind. Sarah and Lucia became known as the women who'd been saved by an unexpected ally. More importantly, they became known as partners. Their bond was no longer something they had to hide. Among the Apache, the love between women was respected and honored. They lived openly together, raised children together, became respected elders. Matthew Cordell became a ghost story, a legend that traveled between worlds. The Apache spoke of him with respect. Some of the cavalry officers spoke of him with hatred. He continued his work, saving lives, providing information, moving through the spaces where the frontier was still contested and fluid. Years later, when Sarah and Lucia had grandchildren, they would tell them the story of the afternoon beneath the cottonwood trees, of the moment when death had seemed certain and the universe had sent them a man with a conscience and a fast horse. They would tell them that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places, that sometimes the boundaries between enemy and ally were blurred beyond recognition, and that the truest act of courage was refusing to let your country's wars become your personal convictions. And in every telling, they made sure to emphasize the most important part. After rescue comes the hard work of building a life. Matthew had given them time, had broken their chains, had offered them a chance. But it was Sarah and Lucia who had seized that chance, who had ridden into the desert together, who had created something beautiful and true in a world determined to destroy them. The cottonwood trees stood by the river for another 100 years, and if trees had memories, they would remember that afternoon when violence was interrupted by conscience, and 2 Apache hearts were saved not by warriors, but by a simple cowboy who decided that some things were worth risking everything for. Matthew Cordell died in 1912, in a small town in Arizona, having spent his entire life balancing scales that could never truly be balanced. But he died knowing that the sister he'd failed to save had found vindication in 1,000 lives he'd helped save instead. And somewhere in the Apache camps in Mexico, Sarah and Lucia lived into old age, their partnership never questioned, their bond never broken, forever grateful to the cowboy who'd ridden in from nowhere and changed everything. Love, they learned, came in many forms. Not all of it romantic in the traditional sense, not all of it recognized by the society that condemned them, but the love between 2 women who'd faced death together and chosen to live together. That was as real as anything in the world. And the love of a stranger who'd chosen conscience over safety, connection over tribe, that too was real, lasting, transformative. The cowboy who saved 2 Apache hearts had done more than save their lives that day. He'd saved their right to live as themselves, in a world that wanted to erase them. And in doing so, he'd become part of their story forever. Not as a lover or a family member, but as something equally important. The witness who'd said no, who'd drawn a line, who'd refused to let injustice stand unchallenged.